So this entire set of problems from 1 through 9 are all about making this rag rug and starting a business where you're making the rag rug. So you have a lot of information up here that's going to help you. But this idea is you've got this client who wants you to make a rag rug for them. And the process of a rag rug, if you remember me showing you, it involves making knots. So you take a big king sheet, or you take some kind of sheet, you cut it into strips, and then you use those strips to make knots to go in this circular pattern. So the knots each create a certain amount of area that will then go in a pattern. And this person wants you to make a circular rag rug with a 50-inch diameter. So they also want to know how much it's going to cost them and how long it's going to take you to make it. So you have a lot of things that you need to calculate first in order to be able to answer those questions. So the first thing that we want to know is just how much area is that rag rug that your client wants you to make. So how much area is it going to take up? And you know that it's a 50-inch diameter. So we've got this situation where you've got a rag rug and it's a 50-inch diameter, which means it's a 25-inch radius. And remember, the formula for area is pi r squared. So what you're doing here is you're just taking pi times 25 squared. And that's the same thing as 625 pi square inches. So I'm going to leave pi in there right now, but if you wanted to, you could multiply it out. 625 times pi is actually 1963.5 square inches. So this is a more practical number, but since we're going to be working with the numbers, it's sometimes nice to not have to round till the end. Then the question is, how much area does 90 knots make? So why are we talking about 90 knots? Well, if you go back up here, you can see that 90 knots makes a circle with a radius of about 2.5. So that is 2.5 right here, inches, right? So we've got, right now, 90 knots makes a rug with a radius that's 10 times smaller, right? So how much area is that? Again, that's just pi r squared, right? So that's like 2.5 squared, 6.25 pi square inches, although you can take that times pi, and that's 19.635 square inches, right? So notice that the decimals are not that, it's really just a matter of the decimals being different here, right? Because we're squaring something that's 10 times less. All right, now the next part is how many knots are you going to need to make to complete the rug? So it's easy to fall into the trap to think, well, this radius is 10 times bigger, so then the knots I'm going to need to make is 10 times more. So I would need to make 900 knots. But that trap is actually a trap that is related, that's suggesting that what's really important is the length here, and that's not what's important in making a rag rug. What's important is the area. So when you're dealing with area, you need to set up a proportion around the area. So if you think about this, I'm going to set up a proportion. 90 knots makes an area of 6.25 pi. And I want to know how many knots are going to make up an area of 625 pi. So do you see the difference here? I'm not trying to say it's 10 times bigger. It's actually 100 times bigger, right? So you can either cross multiply or you can just recognize this is actually 100 times bigger, right? So I need to make 9,000 knots. So, and notice I'm including my units each time because here this is real world stuff. I'm really actually, this has a meaning. I need to make 9,000 knots to make a rug this big. And that's important to realize. It's not just 900. It's actually, you're going to be, if 90 knots made this area, the more you get out and around, the more you're going to need to make more knots. So 9,000 is a good prediction. How many hours will it take you to complete the rag rug? So we need to look back up here and kind of find some information about how long it makes you to make these knots. So it tells you that it takes you about 7 minutes to incorporate one strip into the rug, and that each strip makes about 50 knots. So notice we're needing to use these two pieces of information right now. So it takes 7 minutes for one strip, and one strip is 50 knots. So that means that it takes 7 minutes to make 50 knots, right? 7 minutes to make 50 knots. So we can use this ratio to help set up a proportion if you want, right? So there's a couple ways you could go about this. You could convert from knots to strips to minutes, right? Or you can just use this proportion right here. I know it's going to take me 7 minutes to make 50 knots. So how many minutes is it going to take me to make 9,000 knots? And then you don't really have to worry about what you multiply by or divide. You can just use this proportion. So 9,000 times 7, 63,000, and that's going to equal 50x. And then divide by 50 on both sides. Okay, that's going to take me 1,260 minutes. But the question wasn't about minutes, it was about hours. So I need to continue to convert that. I need to divide that by 60. So it's going to take me 21 hours. Now, if you have been dealing with some rounded numbers up here, you may be getting some rounded numbers down here. And that's not the end of the world, but it's just one of the reasons why sometimes it's better to leave things unrounded, because sometimes the rounding errors make things more difficult in the long run. So 21 hours to complete the rug. How many strips are you going to need to make this rug? Well, so let's see. We know that it's going to take 9,000 knots. And there, again, we're back here at each strip makes about 50 knots, right? So we're going to need to divide 9,000 by 50. So 9,000 by 50 will give us 180 strips. And then how many king size flat sheets will you need to buy? So we're going to need to come back up here and consider some more information. A flat sheet for a king bed is 102 by 108 inches, and each strip is 1.5 inches wide. So here we're using these two bits of information. And to understand that, we might want to draw a picture. So I'm going to draw a picture. We've got this like here, 102 by 108 inches, right? And then we're going to cut this into strips like this, right? And each strip is going to be 1.5 inches wide, but 108 inches long. So we're going to cut it into strips along this side, leaving this side intact. So how many strips can I get out of this 102 inches? So that would be 102 divided by 1.5. That would be 68 strips for one sheet. Right, so one sheet's going to give me 68 strips. But how many will give me 100? I need 180 strips, so I can divide that, right? If I take 180 divided by 68, that's going to tell me how many sheets I need. which is 2.65, but I can't buy 2.65 sheets. So I just need to round up. I'm going to end up needing to buy 3 sheets in order to do this. And how much will that cost me? Well, we need to come back up here. You can buy flat king sheets for $7, so that'll cost me $21. And what's nice about that is I'm going to have a little bit left over, so if I end up needing a few extra strips for something, that gives me a little wiggle room. So $21 for that. The next sheet asks how much should you sell the rug for if you want to make at least $5 an hour for your work plus cover your costs for the sheets. So I am going to have to work for 21 hours approximately. $5 an hour, that's going to be $105. But then I'm also going to need to add that $21 to cover the sheets. So in the end, I need to charge $126 if I want to get paid $5 an hour plus that $21 extra so that I'm not paying for the sheets out of pocket. So that already is a, fairly expensive rug. And I'm only getting paid $5 an hour. So that's just something to remember. Luckily, I can work on this while I'm watching TV. So it's not that big of a deal to only get paid $5 an hour. But if I was even wanting to get paid $10 an hour, it would almost double that price. So just something to think about when you're running your own business, how much you're paying yourself in those moments. And then lastly, your client wants to know how long it'll take you to make the rug. And it's going to take you about 2 hours each weeknight because you have to go to school too. But on the weekends, you can put in 3 hours each day. So if you start the rug on Monday, when can they expect to have that rug? Well, Monday through Friday, you're going to be working 2 hours each. So that would be 10 hours by Friday, right? But you need to put, and then you're going to have a weekend, right? Where you can put 3 hours each in. So that's 6 more hours. So 16 hours by Sunday. But again, you still need to put in 21 hours. So I'm just going to start like 18 hours by Monday, 20 hours by Tuesday. That's still not quite enough. So I'm going to finally be able to get in the 21 hours. So 22 hours by Wednesday. So Wednesday night, I'll have this done. So my client can expect to have this on Thursday, right? Of next week. Thursday of next week. So those are all important things to be able to figure out if you're running your own business, charging people things ahead of time, because they're going to want to know ahead of time how much money, and you're going to want to know how much is worth your time. And you're going to want to be able to be on time with them for the project.